Um, Everyone, my name is Commissioner Eric Dunlap. I guess that'd be Commissioner Dunlap. It's 6:40, and I would like to call the first meeting of the Public Works Infrastructure Commission to order. Um, Philip or Reina, will you please call the roll?
Okay, I'll do it. Commissioner Hammond, Commissioner Dunlap,
Here.
Commissioner Abelson,
Here.
Commissioner Brunel,
Here.
Commissioner Kerwin,
Here.
Commissioner Hernandez, Commissioner Mailing, Commissioner Trevino, Commissioner Sharma.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Our first item will be the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll ask Commissioner Abelson to lead it.
All right, please stand if you're able. Face the flag, place your hand over your heart. Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you, Commissioner Abelson. Our first agenda item is general public comment. So this is public comment on items not on the agenda tonight that are somewhat under the purview of the Public Works Infrastructure Commission. So I'll check, do we have any, if you would like to give general public comment, I think we have some comment cards somewhere in the back, or you can run up and we'll provide you one. Do we have any general public comment?
No, we do not.
All right, any on Zoom? Raise your hand if you're on Zoom.
There are none at this time.
All right, thank you. All right, moving on to agenda item 2. It looks like we have a presentation on the library/community center site plan project and community engagement overview. So I will turn it over.
So good evening, commissioners, and the staff that's in the room, and also our council member. My name is Victoria Rocha. I'm a resident of South Pasadena. I used to be a community services commissioner, and now I am part of the Library Community Center Site Plan Ad Hoc Committee. It's such a long title, I had to write it down and look at it one more time. I actually also happen to be the Deputy Director of Public Works for the City of Monrovia, so it's a delight to be obviously presenting to you. So I am not going to go through the presentation, actually, because I think everything that's in there is something that you can look at and refer to. Really, I'm coming to you here as like another citizen, and obviously very motivated lover of government. I go do my day job for pay. I come here for free because I love this community so much and want to contribute to it. And this is your opportunity to also weigh in on a major potential project as we move forward within it. So that whole site there at Library Park, we also have the senior center and the library. It's in great need of some updating. And with that, community input is so incredibly important. And of course, you've been chosen as commissioners because it's believed that you have a little bit of an ear within the community, and the city council knows who you are. So this is me just saying, please, 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 both you and your families and your neighbors, like encourage everybody that you know. I even went to my spin class at Pedal Studio and said, can I make an announcement at 6:30 in the morning for participation? And they said, yeah, and let me put up a flyer to be a part of this process. Normally, Kathy Billings would have been here. She is the library director to do this presentation, but she's actually at one of the items that's happening today, which is the open house. There's one tomorrow. And then there's also going to be these pop-up events at our spring extravaganza, the Eclectic Music Festival, which I'll be volunteering at, so you can come interface with me even more, or at the farmer's market, or you can just do the survey online. And all it is you're getting to say what you'd like to see happen as a part of that site. And because we have such a diverse range of voices on that ad hoc committee, I will say, because of my public works background, like one of the things I knew I wanted to see that I brought up, and it may or may not happen, is what is like Wi-Fi going to look like? What is having EV chargers going to look like? Because if you're going to be tearing up streets and sidewalks, shouldn't we be laying conduit as a consideration, right? So you might have unique ideas that need to be heard, and this is your opportunity to do that and take that survey and be a part of this process. Tell everybody, and that's it. That's all I'm here to say, is be even more civically engaged than you already are. Any questions for me?
Thank you so much, and thank you for your enthusiasm and
Yeah.
energy. I guess If anyone has any questions,
You want me to start?
Oh,
go ahead,
sure.
Commissioner Abelson.
Thank you for being here. I love your energy, especially at the end of a long day.
Thank
Hot
you.
day too. So a few questions. So looking at the timeline,
Yes,
so it ends, I think that says October 15th, says 10:15 city council.
right. So and I should say, this is very important. This is all only an assessment. So this is one of those things where we're not promising anything at this point. What they're doing is they're gathering all that community input and then saying, the community wants these bells and whistles versus these bells and whistles. Here's what it might cost, and especially we know that costs are rising. And then here's potential funding mechanisms. This is all only pie in the sky assessment. So what's going to council is going to be the outcomes of that assessment.
Okay.
Yeah.
You got my next question, which was the
Perfect.
funding piece of it.
Yeah.
So there isn't some pool of funds sitting waiting to be spent.
No,
This is what we'd like to see.
yes,
And then we're going to go try to find the funds to accomplish.
correct, yes. And they're going to help at least identify what potential pools could look like, right? So you have potential state appropriations or grants or bonds. Like there's also different types of funding mechanisms. And I know like one of the things on the survey, just because I happen to work in government and do grants, I said, hey, can we make sure that we're asking optional demographic questions? Because when we're looking at grants, we might want to put that information in there to tell some of this story. Because I think people, when they think of South Pasadena, they think of a certain type of community, which is charming, but maybe they don't realize that we have 55% renters, right? So things like that. So trust me, this committee, the staff, everybody's on top of it, that we know that the next piece of this will have to include some funding. And part of that assessment is making sure that we're asking for the things we want, but also considering what does that mean for the funding in the future.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, that's terrific. I'm glad you're thinking of all those important things. And the other thing that's sort of near and dear to my heart is, of course, parking and traffic flow.
Sure.
Is that something that's part of the conversation at this point?
It's not quite at this point, because again, this is just going to be the site itself, but that doesn't mean that there wouldn't be, because once you actually have to start drawing plans and doing a full, like, this is where we want to go with it, those considerations would have to be taken into account.
Okay,
Yeah,
Hey.
think of this as your wish list at this point.
right. And we do a lot of wishing
I know.
in South Pass. And
Yes.
I just want to make sure that, and I know we're not at October yet,
Right.
but as you're sort of working through the process, and I'm going to try to go to one or more of these events.
Great.
As you're working through the process, trying to keep in mind sort of the practical impacts of
Absolutely.
all of this, and parking around that site is challenging.
Yes.
It's challenging for the user, if the seniors, those using the library, the people
Yeah.
wanting to attend events at the community center, residents. It's a tough one.
Yeah.
So it'd be great if the conversation included considerations. Okay, if we want to do all these things, and if we do these things, let's make sure we think about ways to accommodate
Sure.
what comes along with it.
And I will say, what you will find in the survey, as much as they're not doing necessarily like a traffic impact study, one of the things they are asking for is how do you get to the library site? So that way they can assess part of that. And they do ask, as a part of that wish list, would you like to see something like underground parking and getting some of that feedback? So again, it's that opportunity to weigh in on what a site redesign would look like. It's not a full impact study, but it's like, we know parking is a challenge. Make sure that's a known thing.
Perfect. And
Yeah.
last comment,
Sure.
I'll yield. I like what you just said, by the way.
Mm.
And not only accommodating parking and traffic demands, but also accommodating all the alternate modes of
Right.
getting from A to B. you know,
Absolutely.
biking and walking, whatever else might be
Yes.
out there, so that we can encourage people to use other modes as well.
Yeah.
It'd be great.
I live like way up there and I still walk down because it's such a nice walk.
Nice.
So,
It is.
yeah.
It's one of the it's prettiest parts of town.
It
So
is.
Anyway, thank you
No problem.
Thank you.
Any other?
Other questions?
Yeah, quick
Commissioner
question.
Bruno?
Yeah, just great. This sounds really fabulous. So thank you.
Yeah.
Just a quick comment. I think just like in addition to thinking about parking and driving, and piggybacking off of what you shared,
Mm.
I think asking people like what their barriers and challenges are
Sure.
in accessing the site on foot or by bike or in
Yeah.
a wheelchair or scooter. So you can really like get that feedback, and then that could be like folded into your recommendations as well.
Definitely. And there's obviously ADA compliance stuff, things to keep in mind as well. So that will all be taken into account for sure. And again, please encourage people to take that survey because we don't know the barriers that every person's experiencing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just one other thing, it sounds like this will only result in like a set of recommendations, right? So
Correct.
there won't be any feasibility assessed as part of this phase. That would be
No.
like a future phase if you got
Correct.
more funding.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, sounds good.
No problem.
Anything else?
Just one quick question.
Sure.
So does the library have a longer term timeline? Are you looking at, we're still in the very early stages with assessment and also with feasibility and planning and going out and seeking funding. Are you all thinking about this with a 10-year time horizon?
They don't put
15-year?
any timelines at this point because
Okay.
they have to know what people want, and then that will influence timeline, process, and funding.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. It's
Thank you.
definitely like a kind of a chicken and egg issue a little bit, but we're starting with what do people want? Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
no problem.
All right. How many folks have you heard from so far?
I haven't seen what the survey results yet. We
Okay.
haven't had a meeting yet since the survey was released, but I encourage you to pop in on any of these events and ask some of the consultants that are doing this. I'm sure they would be happy to share.
Great. One more. Commissioner Abelson?
Thanks. Does your committee meet regular, like
We do.
every couple of months or
No,
or
once a
third
month.
Wednesday or?
Right now, we meet once a month. Oh, goodness, you're going to ask me when we meet. We meet the first
Or if you wanted to find out how
Thursday.
would,
It's online. So everything's online. All the materials are online. I have the address here. It's southpasadenaca.gov/LPC. LPC is that forward
so
slash.
you meet monthly?
We do.
Oh, great. Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank
and
you
thanks
for
for
having
joining
me.
us tonight.
I
It's-
appreciate
It's
it.
great that this project has
Thank you.
an enthusiastic champion.
Thank you.
All right, that was fun. Next up, hopefully it's just as fun. We have agenda item 3, Public Works Department overview. And I'll turn it over to, I'm guessing Ted Gerber, Director Gerber.
Thank you, Commissioner Dunlap. So, welcome to the Public Works Infrastructure Commission. As you all know, this commission is a result of the combination of the former Mobility Transportation Infrastructure Commission and the former Public Works Commission. So some of you are familiar with what we've done in those commissions. Some of you are fairly new. Tonight, we are planning on going over an overview of our department and sort of your areas of advisement responsibility. Thank you, Philip. And we'll talk a little bit about what the future holds for this commission. We're not going to be tackling any really specific project advisement tonight. We'll save that for the months ahead, including May. And I also want to talk to you about how commissions typically work. Your role is an advisory body towards council, and so we would typically develop a work plan of what we will be doing every month to focus on what the council priorities are. So the council has a new prioritization system that they just released in February. They have a list of their goals for 2025. So it's important that your commission work aligns with those goals, and so we'll be coming back in a future meeting to talk about your work plan and which projects you'll be focusing on. Some of them we'll touch on tonight when we talk about the capital improvement program. So please feel free to ask questions about how this works. The consolidation of the two commissions was really about putting two halves together. The way that your commission responsibilities were defined in the municipal code were, it was very specific about mobility and transportation, active mobility, transit goals in the MTech ordinance, and then Public Works was basically everything else. So typically we handled transportation, operational, and capital issues in MTech, and then Public Works really handled other capital issues. We didn't get very much into Public Works operations, but we'll share those details with you tonight so you can see what the scope of that is. So any questions as we get started? Please feel free to ask as we move along here. Please, yes. Absolutely. Yeah. So the question from Councilmember Ferguson was touching on the workflow of how agendas are creation and how that works with the commission. So as the council develops their overarching priorities, call it, priorities list, call it a strategic plan, basically what they want to work on during the year. Where that intersects with this commission's responsibilities, our staff will develop a draft work plan of what we think needs the commission's advisement, and we'll bring that to you for discussion. So you have input on what that work plan is. The only really critical factor is that whatever we're working on, we're aligning with that council authority. So we're not going out and working on something other than what's in the council's plan. So in some commissions, we structure that on a monthly basis. We know what we want to talk about in May, June, July. Typically for these commissions, when they're so project focused, we don't always know what's going to be ready at a certain month. So we'll give you a general list of what we plan to work on during the year based on our CIP and our budget, and we might have to switch those things around. But that's how that work plan is developed, and that's how those agenda items get established. Now, occasionally an issue might just come up that it gets agendized. As long as it's within the scope and charter of the commission and it aligns with what the council wants us working on, we can add those items as they become important. So hopefully that sort of addresses what you're asking. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that point up. So Councilmember Ferguson is referring to the relationship between the commission and the staff. So it really depends on the style of the commission, but as we elect a chair and a co-chair, typically the staff and that chair and or co-chair will discuss what's coming up on agenda to make sure that everyone's on the same page about what's being presented and what's expected of the commission. Because many times we'll have a request of a recommendation that you'll make that we'll eventually take to the city council. So it really depends on the style of the chair and co-chair, but typically that's how it works. Okay.
Ted, Director Gerber, you've mentioned council's priorities. Are those available? Were they at a city council meeting?
Yeah, they were at a city council meeting. What we can do is that we can just email that out to you. It's publicly available. We'll make it easy for you. We'll send it to you, and that'll likely be on our next agenda for discussion. We try to align those priorities and that work plan with our fiscal year budget development process so that, we're budgeting what we're supposed to be working on. So it's perfect timing to discuss that in May and or June. But we could share that with you. Spoiler alert, infrastructure is a big item on their priorities list, including streets, water, sewer infrastructure. There's a few other priorities in there that are interconnected, but that's a large part of our CIP and what you'll see coming from both of the commissions combining here. Yes.
I was just going to ask, is there going to be further refinement of those priorities? Because I recall the priorities were pretty high level. I mean, there's a few items that were specific in that priority list, but most of all, it was, we want safer streets, or, it was a very, pretty high level. So how does that translate into these specific project priorities?
Yeah, that's a great question. The way we see that translate is when we're putting forth a proposed budget, in very particular what our CIP projects will be for, say, fiscal year 25-26. So in our city, we produce a 5-year CIP. The first year is the most critical because every project on that list has to be budgeted, appropriated. If we're going to start working on that project on July 1 of the fiscal year, then we have to, know what the scope of the project is and how we're going to fund it. Years 2 through 5 are more of a planning exercise. But to your point, that CIP will reflect what's in their council priorities. So if they, streets are a high priority, or even safer streets, or some sort of transportation related improvement, not just the street infrastructure, then our CIP will contain, which street projects are moving forward, where are they, which transportation projects are moving forward. Where those priorities intersect with some sort of operational need, like improving the tree canopy in the city, or the process of evaluating tree permitting, which is also a public works function. That might not necessarily align with a capital improvement program project, but it certainly aligns with, well, have we dedicated enough resources in our operations budget? And that's where you'll see something like that represented in the budget that reflects those priorities. In the opposite, you'll see, things maybe deprioritized. During our CIP discussions, you'll see projects that perhaps were planned in past years and forecasted forward, but we decide, well, we're not really going to move forward with that project, or we're going to defer that project because it's not on the priority list or it's a lower priority.
Yeah, just to clarify, those CIP discussions are just among staff, or is that staff with the council members?
Yeah, it's definitely staff with the council members. We typically have a pattern of staff will propose what we think should be in there, and then it gets refined during these commission meetings, and then absolutely during the council. So a good example is last year, we did have a long discussion with the council about reprioritizing our CIP, which projects should be deferred, which projects should be focused on. And we actually discussed prioritization at a very specific level with the council. We numbered the projects and committed additional resources towards ones that they really wanted to see done.
Thank you.
Of course. Okay, so let's talk about Public Works. So this is really an overview of our department to get you familiar with the types of projects and programs we'll have come forward here. There we go, perfect. So our Public Works department is divided into, there's 5 divisions and 2 teams, as we call them. We've got our transportation division, engineering, which also handles CIP, our operations and maintenance, and that's really what the people you see out every day sort of taking care of the day-to-day of the city. We have our environmental programs and sustainability, our water division. The city has its own water, we call it a water department. It's a division, but we'll get into that in a moment. And then we have 2 teams. We have an administrative team, and then we have a new team that was established by the city council last year, we call our CIP division. So our administrative team is really the heart of our day-to-day operations. We run a customer service line for people to report certain any type of public right-of-way issue. So we have people staffing that. We provide community updates, not just in this council meeting, but through our website, through publications, through mailings, through blog posts and social media. That service request processing, we have a multiple pathways for it to reach us. If you don't know, we have a city app. A lot of those requests through the city app come directly to our department. Phone answering system, email, every which way we can try to capture those requests. There's commission management, agenda management, staff report, all the administrative function here and with council. We have a massive amount of documents, as you could imagine, that we have to manage. And along with that comes a lot of public records requests, probably some of the most in the city, and then handling claims that come in from the city. Budgeting, we have hundreds of accounts. The way the way that our budget is broken down, that we manage in-house. We have the most grants and special revenue funds of any department. Our CIP alone has about 20 different funds that we manage, and along with that comes grant reporting and auditing. We have, hundreds of vendors. We have thousands of invoices, so we have contracts. We do a lot of our procurement and purchasing within the department, and that's a sort of a decentralized task in the city. Each department handles it pretty much on their own. We do our own bid solicitation with public works projects, maintenance agreements, professional services, that type of thing. Of course, we have a field labor force, so we have a lot of human resources coordination. There's a lot of work put into keeping our workforce safe, managing their time. We basically have staff working 24/7, water production, responding to issues in the field day and night and weekend. We work hand in hand with our public safety teams on emergency management. This most recent fire and windstorms, most of the workload was with Public Works. The first couple of days was a big public safety need, of course, but for the following months for debris management, for damage repair, and certainly right now, the grand effort for FEMA and Cal OES reimbursement and reporting is a responsibility within Public Works. And then all the other administrative tasks that come along with that, as far as implementing and utilizing technology systems, and anything else, if you've ever worked in a job or an office that you can imagine has to happen, happens with our administration team.
Ted, as you're going through this, would you mind giving us an idea of the staffing level of each team? Like when you say the word division,
Sure.
like we have divisions that are 100 people, but
Right,
I
yeah.
think these are.
Yeah.
I have a friendly amendment question. I was wondering if there are managers for each of these divisions or.
Yes, so we have 5 managers for 1 manager for each division. The teams, that's why we call them teams and not divisions, don't have a direct manager. So our administrative team, it's a group of, put me on the spot here, our entire team is 42. The staffing for the department has never been fully staffed. So we always have vacancies. Now, one of our highest vacancy component, mainly in our engineering team. We're not going to get into the details of that. But our administrative team is made up of 2 management analysts, 2 management assistants, 3 management assistants. So we have 5 people basically on our administrative team. And they report directly to either myself or the deputy director in Public Works. So I can go through that as we go through each slide here.
Oh, sorry, Chair, one more question just on commission management. How many commissions does Public Works support?
So now we have 2. We had 3 when MTech and Public Works combined. Our other commission is the Natural Resources Environmental Commission.
Okay.
And their responsibility is mostly in the environmental programs and sustainability area, with the exception of tree permitting, which is an engineering function, and that commission acts as a sort of a public hearing body for tree permitting.
Okay.
So this commission won't have the responsibility of addressing, environmental programs or waste management or tree urban forestry management. Those will be reserved for the other commission, but pretty much everything else falls into Public Works infrastructure.
And we both
Infrastructure
meet
Commission.
monthly? All right.
Yes. Well, actually, we changed the NRC. It used to meet monthly. Now it's meeting every other month.
Okay.
So that was part of the overall city strategy to reduce resources applied to commissions. But we do have to have special meetings sometimes for NRC because of a tree issue can't wait every other month. So now we're on a every other month schedule for NRC.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Okay, so our transportation division. So this is for as far as staffing, we have 1 person who's sitting over here in our black blazer. This is Bassam. He's our transportation program manager. So we have 1 person in our transportation division, and it's quite a heavy load. Transportation planning in the city has sort of moved around. It's currently landed in Public Works. It sometimes can be a community development component, but at the moment, in our transportation division, we handle capital project planning and execution, the interagency coordination between all the transportation organizations in the region. The city has ITS systems that have been recently installed over the last couple of years, so we manage those, and as well as the other traffic signal devices. Our active transportation programs and events, some of you know about these events that we have open streets events that we partner with our neighboring cities. With regard to entitlements and community development planning, we review the traffic impact analyses. We do our regional transit coordination, especially with our friends in Pasadena and LA County Public Works, where we have regional transit bus services. Roadway striping, markings, signage, engineering and design go through our transportation division. And then, facilitation of the MTech, now PWIC, commission items. As if you're a former member of MTech, you know how much work we had in terms of every month going through all of the different advisement issues and as well as going through our status report. So, the way the Public Works is organized is, we don't have enough staffing for each division to have its own administrative staff. So our administrative staff at the top assist the folks in every division. So you can see we have 2 management analysts here helping with the commission, and they'll move in and out of divisions based on what the project and program needs are. Okay. Engineering, their main workload is our capital improvement program, planning execution. So where one division might, start a project, engineering is their main focus is, if it's an engineering related project, they'll develop it, but it's really about execution, about getting projects designed, bid, and built. They also handle permitting, and we have quite a bit of permitting types. We have encroachment. When there's an event, we do address assignment for, basically managing all of the parcels in the city. If you're familiar with what a city engineer does, we handle map act issues like subdivisions and track and parcel maps. I mentioned that we handle tree removal and trimming, both the permitting and the hearings. Development in the public right-of-way, and that can be pretty tricky in a city that's over 100 years old because there's a lot of interesting sort of things that have happened over the last 100 years with regard to easements and interesting built right-of-ways and subdivisions. Our interagency coordination, particularly with LA County Public Works, but also a lot of our stormwater-related agencies, because we are a member of both the Upper LA River watershed and a small portion of the Rio Hondo watershed. Used to handle Public Works Commission, now here for PWIC, and then other sort of compliance and utility coordination issues with Southern California Edison, the gas company, some of the communication vendors in the city, and other public right-of-way type of issues.
Who manages that division?
Oh, so that is Michael Vartanians. He's here in the gray suit. He's our principal engineer. And that division has 3 engineers, which have been vacant for about over a year. We just hired one who started on Monday. And we have 2 inspector positions. One is full. And then we have an intern position also, but that hasn't been filled for some time. So that's really where our recruitment focus has to be. Recruitment's difficult, and retaining staff is difficult in many municipalities, especially South Pasadena. And so we're trying to build up that division. And I'll get to it, but that's kind of where the CIP division team came in, which is, I'm getting ahead of myself, but that's a contracted support team that is helping us deliver CIP projects while we're trying to build the staffing in our engineering team.
As far as smaller projects, things that are just transportation related, signing and striping plans and signal plans, is that under this engineering team or is that under?
It depends. It's mostly under transportation, but transportation is relatively new. Bassam's been here for 3 months. So the staffing is relatively new. We had a transportation program manager before about a year ago.
Correct.
But it depends on what it is. So if it's say it's an installation of signage, that really goes to our operations and maintenance team because it's something that our field staff can do. If it's related to traffic engineering, it will land with transportation. If it's related to more roadway construction, it will land with engineering.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you'll leverage consultants to.
Absolutely. Yeah. We have a long list of, we have an on-call consultant system. We have dozens and dozens of consultants, especially in the transportation space. We have about 17 on-call transportation consultants with varying expertise. Some are more in active transportation, some are more in modeling, ITS advisement, and so we rely on them heavily. We don't do a whole lot of design work in the city. We'll do design review, and we do procurement development, but we rely on consultants for a lot of that work. So if you're used to a larger county organization, it's not like we, have a in-house center for delivering those type of work.
Thank you.
Operations and maintenance. So this really handles all the maintenance of the parks and open space, manages our tree trimming contracts, uh, landscaping of medians and parks, maintenance of all of our buildings and facilities, including MEP systems, plumbing, electrical, mechanical, HVAC systems, um, some of the electrical repair of some of those systems, including traffic signals, but most of the more specialized signal repair work is done by one of our traffic maintenance vendors. Of course, street, sidewalk, curb, gutter, and maintenance and repair. So we have varying levels of in-house repair, contracted repair, and then CIP repair and replacement. Storm drain maintenance, sewer maintenance. We operate a sewer collection system. We don't have any treatment systems, so sewer collection is somewhat straightforward. However, we do have, in some cases, a 100-year-old system, so there's a lot of work to do. We set
Where is
up.
it treated?
It's treated at the Whittier Narrows plant.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have a couple trunk line connections to LA County Sanitation District. Traffic control setup for special city events. We handle in-house the 4th of July parade, for example. We manage our department vehicle and equipment management. And then whatever fuel systems we have. So we have our own fuel tanks. We have our own CNG generation system. And now we have electric vehicle chargers. So that's managed by our operations and maintenance team.
Can I ask how big is this division?
Sure. So this division has one manager, 2 supervisors that are not filled right at the moment. One is filled, but they've been on a long-term leave, and then one position is actually open for recruitment. There's 3 senior maintenance staff, and then there's about 8 maintenance workers.
Who manages?
So that's managed by Katrina Piguero. You might know her. She's been a long time city staff member.
And you mentioned on-call earlier. I think you mentioned something like 17 for the prior division.
Yeah, but that's all
that-
professional services.
Okay.
Yeah, we have for operations maintenance, we have very large maintenance contracts. So for example, our tree trimming contract with West Coast Arborists, that's about $550,000 contract per year. We have our Unix traffic signals contract. I think it's about $200,000. We have a landscaping contract. So the largest contracts in the city for most of the routine, non-specialized maintenance is handled by operations and maintenance. So your staffing will handle things like pothole filling, crack repair, sewer cleaning. They handle more the immediate issues, and a lot of our more routine and preventive maintenance tasks are contracted out because we can get a better, there's a better cost benefit to having large volume routine work. We do have to bring in maintenance contractors for, emergencies or something that's larger than our staff can handle, but those are fewer and farther between.
Okay. And for something like striping, whether it's maintenance or maybe the proposed addition of striping that isn't a major project, do we have somebody on call for those types of?
We don't have on call. That's something that we're working on. We've basically been, we've got a long list of things that we have to establish routine maintenance contracts for. Right now, our big one, our one we're working on right now is sewer because of the compliance and urgency for that. Sidewalks is on next, basically, and then striping and marking is another issue. So what we're doing currently is we have our own paint truck, and we have teams that can do marking work, and we do that annually, especially in the school zones. And we've been starting to contract LA County Public Works to come in because it's an easier process to go contract through a government agency than it is through, a private vendor. It's just faster for us. But our hope is that we can have a high volume striping contract in place once we're able to go through that procurement process.
Okay. Yeah, that would be fantastic. And I know budget season is, if it's not upon us, it's perilously close. Is there a line item or is there a budget for whether we have a contract in place or not for striping maintenance
We do have a line item. It's funded by the state gas tax, which is unfortunately decreasing every year. So it's something that we're, taking a look at how to sustain. Really, the reason we don't have a striping contract is really the staff's ability with lack of staff in the area to facilitate procurement of those services. So it's really just a lot of what we do is from a staff level is the immediate maintenance and some of the routine maintenance, and then bringing in contract work to, routinely take care of the city. So it's really an administrative function to get that in place. Yeah.
Thank you, Ted.
Yes, Councilmember Ferguson. Sure, it's a good question. It falls under engineering mainly. It's a something that's shared with community development. So it depends on what the subject matter is. So if it's a tree related violation, it can fall in public works. If it's a development related violation, it can fall into community development. It just really depends on what the enforcement issue is. If it's a commercial stormwater violation, for example, let's say a restaurant is not cleaning out their grease interceptor, like something that we have a particular professional services contract for a specialized, stormwater consultant to enforce. So it kind of it depends on the issue, and then it can float around based on that. Next is our environmental program sustainability. So this is where you'll see a lot of our community outreach, a lot of our event coordination. Our sustainability division does, Earth Day events, compost and mulch giveaways, community workshops. They really produce a lot of the what you'll see coming out of Public Works. The biggest assignment here is the solid waste management. We have an exclusive refuse agreement with Athens, and that takes quite a bit of work to manage. And we've recently negotiated a new contract based on newer state mandates, and we're actually renegotiating that contract again because of additional state mandates. So we administer that contract. We have water conservation programs that you're probably familiar with if you've got a lawn in the city. There's a great deal of fund management, rebates, assessments that we do. A lot of the sustainability community services are through our water conservation group. Waste minimization programs, some of these are state required, like edible food recovery. Some of these are city initiated, like our gas-powered leaf blower ban. Division handles our climate action plan implementation and our green action plan implementation. There is quite a bit of regional and state coordination, especially as it relates to Cal Recycle. We are a Clean Power Alliance city, so there's work there. A lot of the San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments programs are through this division, and then our vector control relationship is also through this division. And then, as was mentioned earlier, our Natural Resource Environmental Commission, facilitation and support. This team is the liaison to that commission.
Is there significant action on the climate action plan or green action plan?
There's many. There's dozens of goals. It's a multi-year plan, and the implementation schedule is loose because, the funding needs to fully implement the climate action plan is in the millions of dollars.
Mhm.
So basically, when we bring an item forward, we try to accomplish something in the climate action plan. So, when we're purchasing a vehicle or we're improving a building, we try to achieve electrification goals.
Okay.
If we are, negotiating our waste minimization contracts or developing a, plastics reduction ordinance, we're trying to achieve waste minimization goals. There's water conservation goals, energy independence goals, things like that. The Green Action Plan is more of like a short-term goal list, but that's also a similar thing where we try to accomplish those goals through other city actions.
Okay, thank you.
And Ted, this is ARPI's team.
Yes, ARPI's team, and It's RP and one staff member and an intern.
Are those positions filled?
Yes, those are
Oh,
filled. Yeah.
Terrific.
And the last division is our water division. So there's a lot that happens in a small group here. The city has adjudicated water rights, so we actually pump, treat, produce, and distribute almost all the water in the city. Probably around 98% of that is groundwater that we pump from our own wells. We have treatment systems. So we have 3 staff member 24/7 that produce, treat all of the water in the city. So it's a very well-run, tight team. And then we have 6 staff members that work on the distribution side. So managing our storage, our pipeline systems, water main breaks, pumping systems that actually just get the water into your homes and businesses. So, this is a short description, but they do a lot. 6,200 connections in the city. So they maintain 80 miles of pipeline, the 8 storage tanks I mentioned, 6 pump stations. And then a lot of what this division does, especially with the management of the team, is our water resource planning. We have, we meet with Metropolitan Water District, Upper San Gabriel Municipal Water District, with the Water Master. We have producer meetings. There's planning meetings with regard to the state water project and the Colorado River influent, because our though we pump groundwater, that has to be replenished through regional organizations into the main San Gabriel Basin that we pump our water from. So there's a lot of interagency coordination with the water team so that we can appropriately plan for urban water supply. And then lastly is our CIP division team. So this really came out of a discussion with the council last June, where we talked about staffing vacancies. We talked about the likelihood to fill those vacancies in a short amount of time while trying to make some progress on our capital improvement program. So the council decided to appropriate a good portion of funding so that we could temporarily bring on contracted staff through a team of project managers, mostly part-time, and a program manager that would focus on our CIP program, but with a heavy focus on street, water, and sewer projects. And so the goal is to develop this team eventually and bring it on board, likely to be part of our engineering division. But at the moment, it's contracted, and the team basically coordinates the projects, produces schedules and reports, including the report that we're going to discuss tonight about our CIP status, and then helps us with project solicitation and other CIP-related tasks. Okay, yes.
That was gonna, I'm glad you touched on that, because those were kind of one of the questions that I was gonna ask you, was how program management is kept consistent across these various different groups, like project and program management. And so if you kind of speak to kind of how that's kind of working out. And then also I wanted to figure out how like mapping and GIS is being managed, because you're gonna, it's like you have separate divisions that deal with different types of data sets. Obviously, all this stuff sits underground within the city. So I'm wondering how we're staying cohesive as far as that data is concerned.
Yeah, great questions. One of the things that really impacts our productivity, and there's roadmap planning to address this, but it hasn't been addressed yet, is really some of the system infrastructure that we don't have. So, we don't have a project control system. The city doesn't have a budgeting system. We have a, accounts payable and receivable system, but we don't have what you would see at a larger agency. So everything is done with, office documents. So we don't have an enterprise GIS system. We basically have like a cloud account where we store shape data that we can access, but we don't have a way to, modify and we can make decisions off that data in a limited way, not in sort of like a real time or in any way that it gets it's like it's not in an updated fashion. So there's a lot of work to do there. Some of it's on our CIP plan. With lack of resources, there's not a ton of technology implementation. The city was able to, do some of the basics for the last year, like implement a VoIP system. We had copper line phones up until a year ago. So now we have an integrated VoIP system. We have an agenda management system, so we can actually produce agendas outside of just like emailing each other Word docs. But things that have not been implemented are, finance technology systems like an ERP, enterprise GS systems, even a computerized maintenance management system we don't have. For our service request system, it's basically like a legacy ticketing system. We enter something in, we can assign it to somebody so it emails them, they have an assignment, and that's basically the end of the workflow. So there's no asset management tied into that. So again, those are items that are in our capital improvement program, but with a focus on, capital infrastructure delivery, we haven't been able to focus on, fundamental system implementation. But it absolutely is a goal of ours to become more, technologically advanced and more efficient. Okay, so
Any
that's it.
questions on that?
Yeah.
On that portion?
Ted, just quickly, you mentioned we have a deputy public works director. Can
Yes.
you just describe high level what he does? Does he touch all 5 of these divisions? Is he focused on one?
Sure.
What is-
So the way we're structured is the deputy public works director, Antenna, you all probably know him pretty well. We're organized that he handles primarily the water and operations divisions. So mostly our day-to-day work and our field staff. The environmental division reports to him but mainly that's from a water conservation perspective. The remainder of the divisions, transportation and engineering and CIP, report to me, and then the waste hauling component of sustainability is in my shop. So we've divided it up that way just because of the way, how the city operates. It's different in many different cities. Some cities might have an administrative division. That's something that we're looking to do in the future, but right now we just basically have our administrative staff report directly to us and they kind of float.
I think when you first joined our city, there was a structure where there were 2 deputy public works directors. Is that structure still in place and it's just a vacant seat, or no, that's no longer the case?
No, it doesn't exist anymore. We've added positions since I've gotten here. We didn't have any. We had 2 management assistant staff at that time. We had no management analysts. So every budget year, we try to implement some of the resources, the human resources that we need. So we actually had to remove one of the deputy positions in order to add 2 management analyst positions, what you see here in front of you, to facilitate some of that administrative need. That was one of the things we identified as an organizational issue when we got here. And then many of the positions that we're talking about, we've added in those last couple of years. We added the principal engineer position, the transportation program manager position, the environmental programs and sustainability manager. So the department at that time lacked sort of like a middle management a component, which was some of the issue in terms of like actually getting stuff done. There was a large field staff component and then the executive team. But if you're actually going to see projects through, you need that succession in order to, operate efficiently. So we've done quite a bit of restructuring. Certainly we could use more positions, and that's something we'll talk about again this year during the budget season. But yeah, we reorganize in such a way that we don't have that position anymore, but we retained other resources as a result.
Great. Thank you, Ted.
Okay, any other questions about the department? I mean, we did focus on our responsibilities and somewhat on the organization. If I, had some forethought, we would have shown you an org chart. We can certainly pull one offline if you're interested in looking at it. But, this is sort of to give you an overview of what we do and maybe give you a broader perspective if you're new or from one of our former commissions,
Very helpful.
of course.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Chad.
Of course.
I think that was very helpful in just understanding the staffing needs in each team and just the breadth of services that your group provides. Thank you. And are you also doing agenda item 4?
Yeah,
Move to that item?
just to make things, efficient, we just put it all in one presentation.
Okay.
But if you're ready, we can move on to capital improvement
I
program.
think we're ready.
Okay. Philip, I'll go through the slides first, and then maybe we come back to the report. Thank you. I want to jump back on the slides. You want to pull those slides back up? Oh, yeah, we'll just continue with the presentation. Thank you so much.
Does anyone need a quick break? Everyone good? All right, go ahead.
Yeah, you want to take 2 minutes, 3 minutes?
I think we're good.
Okay. Okay, so we started this process with the Public Works Commission of doing a periodic capital improvement program status report. With MTech, we would do a capital improvement program and operational program report, which was pretty comprehensive. What we're hoping to do is move forward with this CIP program report periodically with this commission, and then we'll take this to the council. So since this is our first iteration with this commission, you'll see the report. We're going to be doing this report. We're going to be presenting this report to the council next week. And even between the version we're showing you today and the version we're producing next week, there's been some changes, so I'll talk about that. But want your feedback on the report and what we're sharing. And, as far as operational programs, we don't have the capacity to report on the status of all the operation programs to you every month that we meet, but certainly we can dive into those types of issues as they come up on our agenda. So just giving you a broad overview of our capital improvement program. It is a 5-year program. Many cities will program their 5 years very explicitly. In South Pasadena, for better or for worse, the CIP has been, as I mentioned, the first year is budgeted and appropriated, and years 2 through 5 are more of a planning exercise. So a large portion of the latter years of the CIP are not funded, and those are projects that might not even be realized. They're kind of like a holding place. Now that might change. Other cities do this in a different way, but that was really how, when we started the CIP 5-year program here in 22-23, and right now we're in the 3rd year of that program, that's how it's worked. Now, with that said, previously the way the council addressed CIP is that everything was programmed all at once because when you budget it in the first year, then the money gets appropriated and sort of held. So if you have a preferred project, it's best to get in that 1 year. The problem with that was we had a huge list of projects in our 1 year, and we didn't expect to achieve those, especially since the list was so long, and we didn't have the staffing for it. So since then, we've worked with the council to reprioritize that list, and the current list is intended to be delivered in a year, though you're going to see less than that because of the vacancies that we've had. Certainly, we've had a huge improvement from the previous year because of the addition of the CIP division, and also the addition of the new staff like our principal engineer and our transportation program manager. So it's a 5-year program, obviously with multi-year projects. The budget in fiscal year 24-25 is 18.2. That's actually been updated to 17.8. There was a error in our accounting system that we realized 2 days ago. It just sort of double counted some funding, but it's about the same. And we have 45 active projects in this current year, 24-25, which is quite a bit, but you'll see why in a few minutes. We've had different iterations of how to categorize those projects, but the most efficient we found is what you see before you here. We used to have like a fire category and a police category, but we found that largely those were better categorized as just basically general building and facilities. That's our first category and has a lot of the work that we're doing. You might have noticed on your way in here, and we'll talk about it later in the project, that the doors are turning red here next door because we're putting brand new doors in the fire station. That was as a result of the doors having some maintenance problems. We certainly don't want the doors to not work in the fire station. So, we've categorized those under general building facilities. Some facilities that serve a special purpose are broken out, like the library. So there's special projects that happen there because of the community need and the visibility of those projects. We break those out. But here are 11 categories, and you'll see them on the CIP report, various projects broken out underneath these. So before we get into the report, just to share what's currently in construction. So our long-awaited Berkshire and Gravalia pocket parks. This is a picture of the Gravalia Park. They went into construction about a month ago, so we're in the grading phase. You can see that happening here on the screen. I mentioned the fire door replacement next door, and then the ADA ramp project. Interesting project because the city receives money for federal HUD money that comes to the Community Development Block Grant Program every year for sidewalks. City hadn't done a sidewalk program in some years, so we actually negotiated with the LA County Development Authority, Development Agency, to recapture past years' funding, and we made a deal to deliver them all this year. So we've got almost $600,000 in sidewalk repairs, well, $500,000 in sidewalk repairs that we're delivering right now. And the majority of them are on Meridian, but and we discussed this project with MTech as we were developing it, but there's other locations near the library, in the Raymond Hill area, and various locations in the city that need ADA curb ramps that we're currently installing. That project's about halfway done.
And how do you make the determination on the ADA ramps inside? Is it you look at a sidewalk and if it doesn't have an ADA ramp, it's going to get an ADA ramp? Or
That's a
is there
good question.
something
Yeah,
more
so
technical?
the project was originally, before our team came on board, was originally identified to be along Meridian Avenue. So we, because of how the project was developed with the funding authority, we kept that. It made sense because Meridian Avenue is really a gateway to get to, some high traffic areas like the high school. We're literally installing ramps at the high school. So that was a large part of the project. When we were able to consolidate the funding from past years and we could increase the scope of the project, we did basically what you were saying. We looked at a few factors. We have a good understanding of where the city is lacking any sort of ramp. So the city has a number of ADA compliant ramps, especially in the downtown area, you'll see ADA compliant ramps. But there's also a lot of locations where the city has ramps, they're just not compliant. And then there's locations in the city that there's no ramps. So for this particular project, with our excess funding, we tried to focus where there was no ramps, and then we tried to focus where it was either a high traffic area or a high density area. So that's what led us to the Raymond Hill area, because it's a lot of multifamily housing with no ramps. So we put some there, and then we tried to follow some other corridors, like when we looked at the library has some locations that have ramps, but other locations that don't. So we tried to do that. Our hope is that in the future, we can have a more comprehensive evaluation of where to put them. But the other key here is that we want to stay away from areas that are going to see ramps from other funding sources. So major arterials have transportation dollars that will install ramps. Our street reconstruction program has to install ramps when we're reconstructing a street. So we want to strategically land in places that we might not get to for a little while. So a lot of it was a judgment call with some analysis.
Ted, maybe you can highlight 2 or 3 factors that make a ramp non-ADA compliant.
Sure.
Like the slope, for example.
Yeah, so the slope, you need a particular slope so that somebody who has an accessibility issue can, navigate up and down the ramp. You need a landing area so that they can, have a place to depart from and arrive at. You need what we call truncated domes, which is like a tactile surface that, somebody who might be visually impaired or other some sort of sensitivity can identify. So there's a number of factors that go into it.
And you can't always look at it and tell.
Yes,
especially
sometimes it's a
with
matter of
regards to the
measurement.
slope.
So what was interesting about this project is, it could have been easier because there's standard approaches to building ramps. In other words, like Caltrans has a standard ramp design that a typical ramp, if you can identify it as non-ADA compliant, you can say, well, this is a particular type and we can apply that. And you don't have to do a lot of design work. You could just basically say, contractor, I want you to install this type of ramp. On Meridian, we had a lot of unique design challenges. We had, right-of-way issues. We had one location where the ramp was so tight against private property that we actually had to, it's not exactly a bulb out, but the ramp, curb line pushes out into the street a little bit. So we actually had to get a designer on board to facilitate this project, which took, more money and longer to get it done. The other ramps in the city that we identified the location, we were able to do a lot simpler because we just used a Caltrans standard. So the hope is that in future projects where we need to get a project done every year, we can focus on the locations we talked about, but also ones that are easy to implement. We don't need to hire a designer to give us plans for a ramp. We can use standard plans and just spec out a project and build it, and then save the sort of really design intensive work for a street reconstruction project that has to do designs anyway. All right, so let's jump to the status report. And certainly I don't think you want to go through every project, but we'll highlight a few, and then if you have questions, we can cover them. The first thing I want to do is talk about the structure of the report, because this is the format we're going to use. Then we want your feedback on that. And as I mentioned, we've changed a couple things since publishing this. Jump to the end there. Awesome. Thank you, Philip. So, as I mentioned, all of our current year projects are on the report. We didn't put in future year projects. Are you able to get to the table? Yes, thank you. We'll start here. So we have an in-house project ID that we've assigned. We have a project name and a short description of what it is. The next column you'll see is the budget. And like I mentioned, there's a slight change in this on the most recent report, but not much. And then the next column that I want to talk about is what we call encumbrances and expenditures. So in trying to convey how far along a project is, and this is something that we heard mainly from the council and the finance commission, who will be presenting this next week to that. There's a joint meeting next week with the finance commission, is, when we talk about actual expenditures of a project, it might not really capture how much work has been done. Because as I mentioned, for a lot of these larger CIP projects, a lot of the work is doing the procurement work to get that construction vendor on board in order to build the project. So you'll see it as a project develops, you'll see a little bit of spending, and then the majority of your spending is at the very end of the project. So it's important for us to evaluate where we are with the project by not just looking at what we've expended, but also looking at what we've encumbered. And what I mean by that is, if we've expended 10% of a budget designing it, it may look like we're 10% done with the project, but the next 90% of that project might be done in 4 weeks because the construction's only a month long. So if we've encumbered, meaning that we've reserved the funding for construction, we've selected a vendor and they're on board and they have a signed contract and they're about to begin construction or they're already in construction, you'll see that the project is almost 100% expended and encumbered. So we were trying to look for one metric that would sort of identify where we are globally with the project. Because as many of you are familiar in your, in your careers and your, outside work, it's hard to define where you are in a project by a percent completion. We have projects here that won't see construction for years. We have projects here that may never see construction because we might not be able to get the funding. We're in the planning stage or the design stage, hoping to obtain that funding from a state or federal source. Some of these projects are master planning efforts, so there isn't a construction phase. Some of these projects, are held up because they're the second phase of another project that hasn't been completed yet. So we tried to capture that metric with that column. Since then, as we circulated this report with, well, I'll just mention the next column there is the percentage of the encumbrances and expenditures versus the budget. So it sort of gives you a percentage there. And then there's a funding source we can get into if you like. But our project status is the other comment I want to mention. So we tried to capture just a handful of project statuses to keep this common. So we want to show basically the initial project statuses are scoping, evaluation, and schematic design. And then we get into design development. If there's an environmental step, we get into environmental. We move into construction, and then we move into closeout. In a newer version of this report, we identified that as a footnote. What are the project statuses 1 through 7? You don't see that here, but you'll see that eventually. And not just that, in the project status column, the feedback that we got from our city manager and our other department directors was, give us something more about your project status. And this actually was a comment from Councilmember Ferguson also. So in this project status column now, in a future report, certainly the one that's going to get posted tomorrow night for council, you'll see we tried to give a status of that particular phase. So if a project's in design, we might say the design is 40% complete. If a project's in scoping, meaning like we're trying to develop what the project's going to be, we might say the scoping is 50% complete, or the construction is 10% complete. So it's hard for us to say a project is, over the entire life of a project, it's, 30% complete or 50% complete, because that life of that project could be highly have a high variance. But we're trying to show you, where we are in the phases. So that's a future iteration of this report that will come out, and you'll have that. And I just bring that up because it's a comment we expected from you, really. So, and then lastly, we have a narrative status on what's going on.
Can I ask
Sure.
a question? In that future report, will there be durations or timelines associated with the different phases?
We don't have that yet. It's a good question because due to the variance of when a project can be delivered, it's hard to nail down. I think the best we can do is a fiscal year delivery. So for example, some of our transportation projects, we know they'll be delivered in fiscal year 26, 27. So that might be something that we can provide. Other projects like our stormwater projects are really hard because they're so expensive and nobody really wants them. They're a compliance motivated project. So a lot of our stormwater projects don't have the funding. We don't know when, if ever, we'll be able to deliver them, but we still, as a compliance measure, have to develop them, have to, put money into design and environmental. So we can't really say when those will be delivered. Yeah.
That would still be helpful, though, just to have that column, those timelines.
Right.
If it's unknown.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that could be a future thing. We're trying to, keep the report simple, but I think we can add that if that's something that you desired. Yeah.
Yeah, because I hear from people, there's so much that's just design or planning, and,
Yeah.
and when is this actually going to happen? It's what I constantly hear. It's really hard to say that or to know that.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think where we know that construction is on a schedule and that we're fully funded, we can provide what that expected construction
Or
schedule is.
estimated for those that are.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Of course.
Okay. I know I have some questions on the structure. Anyone else questions on the structure of the? Ted, I think the finance stuff might not be public friendly for the public to understand.
Yeah, it's tough.
Like
Yeah.
it's very internal and it's very city council focused. I mean, I look at this and so the fiscal year, say 25 budget, is that that's just what's budgeted this fiscal year for the
That's right.
project.
Yes,
So
yeah.
it's not a total project budget.
Exactly.
I think that's a little confusing. I also I look and see like nothing's over budget. And I think that's because if you go over budget, you have to find a place in the budget to put that
Well,
in there. Like me as a community member, like a budget means to me like, oh, I budgeted $500 for groceries, but I spent 700, right?
well, we
Um,
as a practice don't go over budget. If we anticipate we're going to go over budget, we'll go to council and reappropriate the budget. So,
Okay.
for example, for the pocket parks,
So
Philip,
this
do you mind-
budget is like, probably you had to reappropriate some.
Yeah,
money.
really two.
Yeah.
So like, for example, those ADA ramp project, the original budget was 513,000, but in negotiating with CDBG, we were able to establish a $600,000 budget.
Mhm.
So when we went to council to award the contract, we said, hey, let's spend the whole thing. We're not going to leave money on the table from a grant source. So we adjusted the budget and then we're in budget. So if we're going to go over budget, you'd see it here, but we're pretty tight with our planning that we don't go over budget. So that's not a mistake. That's intentional. And we've had a budget adjustment. So the pocket parks, for example, the bids came back higher than our budget. And that was anticipated because construction escalation.
Uh-huh.
So when we awarded the contract, we found more budget. We had to move things around in the entire city's budget and reappropriated the budget so that we would be within budget because we can't start a project if we're out of budget.
You're right, right.
Yeah, nothing is out of budget, and if it were, you'd see it here. But yeah, we as a practice we aren't, and I wouldn't even know how the city would handle that because that hasn't happened in my time here because we don't really have negative budgets. Yeah, so
Right.
yeah.
I think the word budget just probably means something else too.
Sure.
The general public when they
Yeah,
pick that
right.
up, they think, oh, this project was budgeted for 70 million and the city spent 100 million.
Right.
Right. They went 20 million over budget or
Yeah.
20 million over budget.
Your
I think that's how a community member looks at it.
your comments are helpful because in parallel to developing this report for you and the council, we're putting together our CIP website, which sort of delivers this information to the general public. And, we're not going to post the status report and say, click here. We want to have the website a little bit more intuitive for someone to understand. So yeah, any comments you have about metrics that the public would, understand a little bit better, we want those because that's, this version, like you said, this report's designed for the council/finance commission evaluation of the CIP. We would like you, if you need to customize it for your purposes, we'd like that, but we'd also like feedback on what we want to display to the public on the public facing component.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess my last comment is some clarification on that. And while I understand that this is the CIP, my heart is fond towards our MTIC project list that I felt like had more short-term things that the community that we could track and see implemented in the community that they could it wasn't like that they could see sooner. It wasn't these large capital projects. They go over multiple, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. They were kind of common sense things or low cost, easy things that we could deliver. And so I think there were a lot of good things that we heard from community members and that we brought up that they want to see happen in the city. It's not going to rise to the level of a CIP project, but I think we want to ensure that those aren't lost.
Yeah, and I understand that. So, I mean, that's a difficult transition for us too. In this type of, level of reporting, we're trying to focus on what the council wants us to focus on. I don't think they want us to lose sight of those operational, achievements that we're trying to accomplish. But as far as what we're putting out to the community and what we're spending our time on, and certainly our direction for enhanced CIP reporting, this is where we're focusing. We still maintain our list of projects. In fact, we assign project numbers to everything, not just CIP, but everything that used to be on the MTech, operational project lists, like, we're putting speed feedback signs over here. Actually, that's on this list because it's a minor CIP item. But if we were going to, you know,
Things like the Marengo study.
right, right. So you'll see that because Marengo will be on the CIP. It's a maintenance, treatment, and restriping project. So you'll see those come up on, like, say, the 25-26 CIP.
Mhm.
So we don't lose sight of that. But I'm trying to think of another example, like it was on that list.
Garfield, Monterey.
Right, but again,
Orange Grove.
that's another CIP. So like
Right.
that, you'll see that. So like we don't lose sight of those. But my point is, if there was something smaller on the list, and I'm having this the citywide speed study,
Mhm.
Yeah.
not a CIP project, but if you've driven around town, you'll see there's speed tubes on the ground because we're doing the citywide speed survey. So that won't be on the CIP, and we have assigned a project, an operational project number to that. So we have our own internal tracking, but I don't think we'll have the resources to report on every single operational thing that we're working on. Maybe we can find some common ground on talking about those things, but we're trying to focus on the high level project reporting, and it's very specifically the direction we've been given is to develop this. So yeah, so for what
Thank
it's
you.
worth.
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner
Thanks.
Abelson?
And good segue because you covered most of my comments. I wanted to make sure all the items on the project status update list from MTIG don't get lost. Many of them are operational, some are capital improvement. A number of them are, capital projects that you're working on, right? They're on this list, but there are a number that are not. And so I just want to make sure whatever we settle on, and I think you've confirmed, they're not lost, they're tracked, right? Because we've had long discussions and a lot of these are triggered by public concerns. So we want to make sure we don't lose sight of it, that we're so busy focused on the capital projects that a lot of these smaller operational items don't disappear. And that's
Yeah.
the fear.
Yeah, they never disappear, but I will be completely honest with you is that we've been giving priorities and they're lesser priorities because of these priorities. So we have them. Some of them have rise to a level of a need, like the speed survey is something we need for enforcement purposes. Other projects, they do fall down the priority list, and that's really the message received from the council is, we know you've got a lot to do, but you're focused on this, and other things are important, but they might not be as high as priority. So that's what we struggle with.
No, I get
Yeah.
it. I didn't mean to
Sure.
put you on the defensive.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I'm not defensive. I want to
So-
manage expectations
No,
more. Yeah.
Yeah. The amount that you're able to accomplish with the resources you have is
Sure, and
very
so
impressive. So I just want to make sure these projects, which have a lot of time and energy has been spent on, just to get them on this list and develop some kind of concept, don't disappear, and that, and if we have to do it, we'll do it, but that the city council is aware of these things, right? That they're things that are important to active members of the community, concerns of the community, whether it's Marengo, Orange Grove, whatever street it is, and that we don't want to lose sight of them. Not that they have to be reported on every month or on this list every month. but
right.
that they're not lost, because that happens a lot in this city. So
Sure, and
I just want to make sure at some point there is some record and there is some reporting of it somehow, so that it's not, it's in your system, but that's where it ends.
Right.
That's all I'm trying to get at.
No, it's a good point. And a lot of those, it's hard to see because you don't see them on this list, but they are CIP projects. They're just not in this fiscal year. So Marengo, Orange Grove, these are projects that have funding, CIP funding.
Exactly.
They're
That's-
projects, they're in the 5-year schedule, but they're not in the 24, 25. And so that's where, when we discuss the 5-year program, you'll probably see those projects because we have to adopt a 5-year CIP by June. And then, that might bring some comfort as to things that aren't lost. I think if you would like to consider some of the really core operational items that don't have a CIP connection, I think those are the things that we'd be interested to hear from you on that you might be concerned about. And we might be able to address that by saying, well, actually, this is a priority because it ties into this. It's just not on the CIP, like the example I gave. But yeah, just to make a connection on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And a couple other points. One, and I apologize to Commissioner Dunlap. I agreed with the comment about the budget and the numbers that are reflected on this report. It'd be helpful not only to know what the total budget is, but perhaps what this year's budget, what the percentage of the total budget is that you're showing for this. Is this 5% of our total, expected spend? Is this 50%? And maybe you said it already, and I apologize, but it'd be helpful to know that.
Sure. Yeah.
And then last, to your point about council priorities, which I know is what drives this, it might be helpful, and this is an amazing, very helpful report already. Is there a way to organize it or tie it to the goals, priorities that city council has given you? So we have all these projects and they're described, but would it be helpful perhaps to tie them to, oh, this ties to number 3 on the city council's list of public works projects or priorities? You know what I'm saying? So that
Understood.
there
Yeah.
can be
Yeah,
a direct
definitely.
connection with say, hey, council, right? This is why this project is serving, what your directive, something like that.
Yeah. Very helpful comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sharma?
I was just going to add, just to echo the comment about total project costs, but I was thinking of it when you brought up the point about a possible website, a CIP website. I think just in terms of for the public having the total project costs, it conveys a better story. I think, it conveys a story to the residents here, how much the city puts into a project. And so I think understanding and at least a projected total cost would convey to residents that this, your city is spending this much on a project over 2, 3, 5 years. So.
That's a good point.
To
Commissioner Kerwin?
Thank you. Following on that point, I guess I really appreciate seeing this the fiscal year budget that you have here. That's very helpful to me. But showing the total cost would be by phase would be very helpful. So
Mhm.
you have the timeline for each phase and the estimated cost for each phase, resulting in a total project cost would be a format that I think would be very helpful.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we could try to experiment with how to deliver some of this information. I mean, in a project controls system, as many of you might be familiar, like you have a lot of these metrics programmed in a database fashion. We don't have a system like that. So even developing this report as our CIP division team meets every 2 weeks, it's a lot of work and things change rapidly. Even how phases are scheduled, because we're constantly quarterly reporting back on funding agreement status, and we might be pushing a phase or adjusting a phase. So without a system that really makes it easy to manage all that data, it's hard to produce a report that comprehensive. I think we'll give you a shot and maybe we can compromise somewhere about where it is. We obviously have all that information. It's just that it's not easy to report out on because we don't have a system that manages it for us. So I think we'll do our best based on the comments you give us, but I ask for some consideration of what our tools are that we have to accomplish what you're looking for, because I would love it if it looked like that, but it's harder to do.
I think I see Ted waving the tools, his hands, putting this stuff into the reports, so.
Yes, yeah.
Commissioner
Exactly.
Brunel?
Oh, you want to finish?
Sorry, I had one more question. So is the fiscal year ends June 30th?
That's right, yeah.
And so what I'm seeing here is 30-something% encumbered. I mean,
Yeah, exactly. So, we talked about this in the staff report, and this was certainly a concern of council. That doesn't look great, but it's actually way better than it was. We only had about 10% expended and encumbered last year. So with the CIP division, but still all the vacancies I talked about, we're at like 35%. We have a couple more projects that are really close to delivery as far as entering construction before the end of the fiscal year. So we expect to be at about 60% by June 30th. So no CIP, as long as it's not over budget, hits 100% because you have projects that get pushed or canceled, and that's the case here. We tried to, on the newer version of this report, we have a lot more footnotes about projects that are, canceled, like our city stormwater project, $1 million project with a $500,000 expenditure this year. We probably won't be moving forward for a number of reasons. So that sort of falls away. That's what, like, I'm doing the math in my head, but that's the 5% or something of the budget or less. So there's projects like that. But ultimately, what we're trying to show you is that the implementation of the CIP division has actually improved our performance, but we need more resources, which we'll be asking for at budget time to improve that even further. So yeah, we're expecting to have a good closeout related to the resources that we have, but certainly our delivery could be better. Yeah. And then, the conversation that happened last year, which was a good one, was reprioritizing. We actually removed, last year was the first year we removed projects from the fiscal year versus getting more projects added onto our workload with that comment in mind that our delivery systems are just not what they should be. So we need to focus on what we can deliver.
So like street improvements is at 10% right now.
Yeah, that'll exceed the budget by the end of the year. We actually, our next street improvement project is probably a $6 or $7 million project. So that includes $2 to $3 million in street improvement, $2 million, $4 million in water improvements. Yeah. And then maybe a few $100,000 in sewer improvements. So actually, we will ask for a new budget appropriation for the street project we're about to deliver. We've got a couple minor water and streetlight design issues we're trying to resolve. Most of the design package is done. And that really stems from the fact that a lot of the streets we're building on are really old. And they've just got really unique problems that we've learned about in the process. But yeah, you'll see us meet our full street budget. Not just that, but strategically, we grouped all of the street projects into one project for the last couple of years just because of the internal reorganization we had to do with the CIP. There was a lot of projects that were sort of on hold, and we had to kind of chop them up and reorganize them. But in the 25-26 CIP, you'll see individual projects. You'll see Indiana project and a slurry project and a Arroyo Mission Pasadena project. The next projects that are in design right now will be split out so you can better understand where they are. Right now, streets, water, and sewer are all kind of grouped together, just where the CIP was developed over the last couple of years.
And then, I'm sorry, finally, just to stay consistent with prior meetings, I asked about Mission Road Diet. It's not on here. Is that?
Yeah, because right now it'll be on here next year because that it started as an operational study and a temporary installation. We've now moved it towards a permanent installation. It still is not funded yet, so you'll see it on the 5-year CIP. We were actually planning to bring the latest design to you next month. It left off with MTech on, I think, the second or third design iteration, and now we think we're at the final design iteration, but we want your input on it. So with that road diet plan, we can't put it on the CIP. It's not programmed yet because there's no funding, but certainly that's a future CIP project that you would see in our 5-year list.
Commissioner Bruno?
And we applied for funding actually recently, federal funding for the project. We just haven't, gotten results back.
I guess I was.
Yeah.
I mean, you have other design, most of, I think, 7 out of the 8 transportation projects are design projects on here. So I was wondering, it's because it's it was temporary or?
Well, yeah, because those projects are funded for design. The only funding we have for Mission Street is for conceptual design. So we don't actually have PS&E funding for Mission Street yet.
Okay, just curious, like, has the city done like an initial scoping on what a project control system would cost and what level of effort would be involved? Because it sounds like a lot of the limitations of reporting and just a lot of your time goes into that. Would that be something that like could be like a special project of the CIP division of like one of the contracted? I don't know if that's a possibility, but just curious. if
It
you
could be.
thought of that.
We have not, to be honest. Our priority implementations have been, are focused on maintenance management system, and even a budgeting system. Like we haven't been able to, all the CIP budgeting we do is all by hand, and the way it's organized is, and this might change, but we literally have to track, per expenditure what funding we're using manually. We don't even have a system that we can track that in. So that's what we've prioritized, and that's what our request has been. But in speaking with the new city manager, with a goal of implementing that, that might be another CIP project. We haven't been able to implement. If you look on the list here, you'll see the CMS system and the budgeting system programmed,
Mhm.
but zero expenditures. So we can add a project control system, but I just don't know if we'll be able to get there, given that the initial priorities weren't done just yet.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense. Just curious. And then I think just going back to Eric's questions. So I think like I agree that like this format is not very like approachable for the public, but like I understand that you're working on a website. Like what is the best way for us to provide feedback on that? Because I think like for the public, having something like very simple and streamlined and like maybe something where they could just like get more information at some point, right? Because like people don't know what encumbrances are.
Right,
like-
exactly.
Yeah.
So, our website, we came up with a couple drafts, and we're basically picking between them. Some of them were more comprehensive, like the report. Some of them were a lot simpler. So what we're really looking at right now is basically a schedule of projects with budget and status, and then like featured projects that have pictures and links that you can click on a document. So we might not have anything exciting to look at for, the library community center plan, because nothing's been developed yet.
Mm.
But, for the pocket parks, we can show you pictures, we can have a link to the plans, that type of thing, renderings of the park. So we're really trying to just identify what's, the few projects that are exciting that we have some information we can share, and then a status on the others. The difficulty with a website, and the city's had one before, is that you got to maintain it and you got to constantly update it. And we need a administrative system to do that on top of every other administrative system we have. So, because if you go to, if you dig deep and find the CIP website in the city, you'll see projects, very old projects that are sort of never been updated. We're trying to avoid that. We don't want to have like a one-time, because most of our websites are static. There's information there, and when that information eventually changes, we update it.
Yeah.
But this will be something we'll have to be live. So that's what we're trying to focus on, the minimal amount of administrative work to give you the focused information. And, to Commissioner Kerwin's point, like, we won't be able to deliver the moving phase funding schedules and things like that, but we can deliver, recent pictures and what's happening recently. So from an administrative perspective, that's the challenge. Sounds easy, but,
No,
there's a lot of work involved.
yeah. I
Yeah.
get it.
All right, I'll still fight for the list in the sense that when we created it, I just want to remind us, like the point was to streamline the meetings, because what was happening prior to this list is commissioners were asking for status on every single one of the projects, and people were giving monologues about why it was important. So
Nobody here, though.
yeah, no one here, no one here. But there are some things that are not on the CIP list that are major things in the city, like the loop ramp, right? Like 70 million for the loop ramp. Like that's not on this list.
But it is in the 5-year CIP.
It's in the
Yeah,
it's in the
right.
5-year.
Yes.
Also, Commissioner Kerwin mentioned the mission slow streets. That was something that people were bringing up
Mhm.
every single meeting. Hey, Ted, we need to do that. And then maybe it's the chair's role to kind of rein that in a little bit. And then those items we need to agendize so we can say, oh, well, we're not talking about the loop ramp today. Sorry, community, that's agendized for October. And so please come back in October and we can give you an update on this project.
Right, right. And I
It's,
think
you
that,
know, like,
yeah,
there, I know the Slow Street, the $70 million for the loop ramp, like those are major transportation things in the city that people are gonna want to talk about
sure.
kind of
And
before they become a
understood. And I
business.
think what we're trying to emphasize is that, you know, the loop ramp project, because we're not working on delivering the project in this year, the only updates associated with that are, you know, the mundane details of the funding agreement and, you know, how we're negotiating that and whether we have to go through another round of FTIP submission to get the project funding for future years.
Right.
Like those are the types of details we have, but we're really, you know, not trying to get down bogged in those details for every single thing and sort of
Right.
deliver you big picture stuff.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
there was just some anxiety among commissioners, like not seeing that reflected anywhere,
Sure.
like thinking that you may have forgotten about it and you weren't working on it, and that we need to keep like bringing it up at every single meeting to ensure that
Sure, yeah, and
you were still
hope we instill some
remembered.
confidence that there's never
Right.
been a meeting that we've said, "Oh, I forgot about that one." Well, you know, so we've got these things. I think we need to discuss because you know, as the advisory body, and understanding that the council wants us to focus and wants to reduce time invested, I think we need to come up with a compromise solution about how we're reporting out on these things. Otherwise, we're going to get stuck in the reporting process and the limited resources you have in front of us will not be working on projects.
Right, we're all
Yeah.
gonna ask you about the loop ramp or the slow streets at every single
Sure,
meeting.
sure. Well, you know, Slow Streets will be
Speak
on
for
your work
yourself.
plan agenda, so, you know, I wouldn't worry about too much of that. In fact, we're trying to bring it next month, so.
Some of this, I was gonna go into during our council communication, so I don't know if you want me to do it now or kind of I can wait till then. But, what I and several other council members are envisioning is that, we really want our commissions to be able to feed input into the council decision making. And so if we're not gonna have an agenda item on the council to decide on the loop ramp, we want to try to hit the things that are going to be coming in front of us. That way we have kind of the commission's able to function as a way for community input, as well as commissioner subject matter expertise to all aggregate into a recommendation before we're just on the dais making that decision. And so we're kind of envisioning this process to kind of work in that way. And so that's kind of what I think a lot of our commissions kind of used to do in town. And you know, Commissioner Abelson kind of speak to that, but that's kind of like what the the end goal of this is. And so as we talk about things like when I kind of mentioned the agenda setting, it would be like if you're having that thing that keeps on coming up, that would be, you know, the opportunity to say, can we just put this on an agenda to have a conversation as to why we're not doing it now? One of the things that I was also going to suggest, and that I will also suggest, you know, with the other commission I liaison with is that commissioners or commission think about like a calendar for like the year. And so like if there's things that you're going to need to do, like going into budget every year, there's things you're going to want to talk about, things that are new that you're going to want the council to kind of consider as the year goes forward. So you can know that that might likely be on like your June agenda. Something like if the loop ramp is something that's ongoing and continuously rears its head, maybe you want to schedule to say we're going to talk about that in November of this year or whenever it fits, right? And so just the idea of like having some type of calendar and cadence to what you want to be able to do within a year, and then that also helps it align with like the fiscal priorities that we set also. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's kind of goes back to the earlier comment about, you know, our scope of work together is what the commission has designated as a priority, which that project clearly fits into that, and what's within your chartered scope of responsibility. So if there are, you know, as we develop the work plan together, if there are community focus areas, which is what we rely on you as community members to tell us, then that's something we should schedule in our work plan, even if it's not, you know, in the CIP. Your commission's not controlled by the CIP. We presented everything we're responsible for in public works. It's just that I think we want to get away from talking about everything at every meeting. And that's really what kind of bogs down our ability to move forward on things. Yeah.
Good.
Commissioner Abelson?
Thanks. A few comments. I appreciated Councilmember Ferguson's comments, and I just wanted to Yeah, we're in a tough spot here. We're in the middle, but you're in the middle, right? Director Gerber, right? We're here to assist you in discharging the duties that you've been given or direction you've been given from council, but then we're also here typically every month hearing from someone, right, with some concern and trying to make sure that that voice is heard, right? And then that the city handles it in whatever way is best, but that city council needs to be made aware of some of the things that we talk about so that they're elevated and they understand that, yes, there are objectives and priorities that council has set, but there are also things that come up that council needs to be made aware of. We need to be able to discuss them, and then you can work on them as you see fit and then report to council. But so we're in the middle, right? We want to, that one of the first things I mentioned tonight was roles and responsibilities. What is our charge, right? What are we here to do? Are we just here to do what we're told? Or are we here to listen to the public, provide input, provide feedback? And I think it's both, right? So we want to make sure we do that, but at the same time, not bog you down so that you can't get anything done, because the one thing that everybody wants is to see things materialize, right? And it's really hard when all you get every month is more requests. So priorities are critical, and we just want to make sure that the other things are there and they percolate, right? And council can make decisions and decide what needs to be done. But you asked me earlier, you know, what things do you think are maybe missing on this? I don't mean all the stuff that Eric and I have talked about, but like Commissioner Kerwin, you know, the Mission Street project, it isn't here, and you've explained it, although it did concern me to say, when you said we don't have funding, I thought we did, but that may be another conversation for another day. But Orange Grove safety improvements, right? That's a Measure M related project. I don't see it here. Maybe that means that you're not planning to work on it this year, but I think that, and I hope that's not the case, but I think that's something that maybe should be here or maybe should be worked on. I don't know, but those are the types of things I think that maybe need to be included. Not every stop sign, not every neighborhood traffic issue, right? But some of the more significant projects, because there are a lot of people that are concerned about this, who are concerned and want to know what's going on, you know? So last comment.
Sure.
For now. PR, marketing, getting information out there. It seems it seems a bit unfair that that is solely on your team to do all of that. And I was wondering, are there resources in the city manager's office that maybe can be leveraged to assist you in posting pictures, getting information out to the public so that maybe it's more efficient and it's not such a drain on your time, but at the same time, the information gets out?
Yeah, that's something we've talked about even recently as this week. You know, with changes in administration, there had been resources, there hadn't been resources. That's something we've definitely emphasized, and it's something that belongs at that level. And I think that's something we're going to see come back and some assistance with. On your earlier comments, I totally appreciate that there's a balance. I think rest assured, since we are so customer service focused, that when issues come up at this commission, you know, regardless of whether they're agendized to discuss in the future, we're certainly going to address them operationally. You know, when, you know, someone concerned about a traffic intersection, that's something that we need to evaluate. It might not be within, it's certainly within your purview, but it might just not be visible from your seat because there's only so much we can do. So I think that, yeah, like I said, finding a good balance between addressing community concerns, because this is a forum for that, and then focusing on what we are looking for you to help us accomplish would be, you know, I think that's where we'll come together and it will work really well.
Thank you, Ted.
Of course.
Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Any other comments on this item or questions?
I guess just to build a little bit more on what Commissioner Abelson was just saying, is there other ways that we can help support you in your efforts and in getting the work accomplished? Is there anything, we're not just asking you to give us information, but ways for us to help? And I guess I'm thinking outreach or other things. I guess related to that, I was going to ask the status of the transportation corridors committee, and is there a role that we might have in for facilitating or supporting.
Sure, and I was going to touch on that. So, the way the transportation corridors working group was envisioned by the council was that as a staff-led effort, we were bringing community members together to talk about certain concepts. So I think as we develop our work plan, it would be helpful for you to help us identify how we organize those discussions. So what we're likely ready to talk to you about next is the Mission Street road diet, um, delivering all of the modeling data that we've performed, going through the design iterations and why we've made certain decisions, and sort of settling on the concept. And to the earlier point, the funding that we have is purely operational funding. We pay for everything we're doing out of our annual budget professional services accounts, if that makes sense. So like we have a certain amount of money we use to do the speed study and, what is currently our kind of NTMP when we have a problem and we have to go evaluate it. That slow streets work is all sort of at a operational level right now, which is why you don't see it on the CIP. We're still working on what does that project cost to even scope a CIP of building out Mission Street. So to answer your question, I think like once we talk about these things, and we have to come up with a plan for how to engage those working groups, I think that would be helpful because I think one thing we're trying to avoid is having these working group meetings and everything that has ever been a problem in the city is on the table during the discussion. We want to segment the discussions to talk about how projects interrelate, but really accomplish something out of that working group. So, when we bring Mission Street, we're certainly going to have to talk about, Fair Oaks and Fremont Avenue and bike lanes. But I think it can provide us the guidance about where the community, pinch points are in that process, we can get to an end goal. Because certainly we have a lot of projects to deliver, but we can't deliver them all at once and they have to work together. So if I can, ask plainly, let's say we deliver the Mission Street conceptual design to you in May, it'll be, okay, what's our community engagement with the working group look like on this project? Certainly we know that we need to do face-to-face interaction with all of the businesses that are impacted by the design improvement. But what else are we missing? Like what community members do we need to draw in and what type of feedback do you want to see when we bring the item back to you so that you can make an appropriate recommendation? So I think we don't have the community pulse like you do on what matters. A perfect example is the Fair Oaks project. When we started picking up the Fair Oaks ITS project, the scope was a lot different than it is now. We started to address things that the community was concerned about for many years that weren't scoped in the project. That's caused us some pain with Federal Highway and our consultant because we're like, whoa, we got to address all these things that people have been complaining about. The project doesn't address them. But we wouldn't have known that without this commission to even target those types of issues. So I think that's what your real value is. We're not going to ask you to, mark up designs. I mean, you can do that if you'd like to, but that's not really what you're here for, in our opinion. You're here to help us get projects done the way you and the community envision them to be done, if that is helpful. Of course.
One very, very specific question.
Go ahead.
Excuse me, bicycle master plan update. Is that a 5-year thing or where would that be?
That's in the CIP. We have budget for that right now. Again, that's just a lack of resources. Our next step was we've already approached our vendor, Alta Planning Design. We lost our second project lead on that project with that consultant. So right now, we had them focus on delivering the most recent iteration of the road diet, and we're trying to finish our scope of work for the bicycle master plan. In short, we don't think $150,000 is enough to do what we need to do with the active transportation plan of the city. But that's what our budget is. So we're kind of asking for a two-tier alternative about like, well, what can we get done initially with the budget we have? And, you know, what would it cost to do what we think needs to be done, which is really concept level designs for the bike network, not just a map about where the bike lanes should go. We already have that. We need to know where they're going to fit, you know, what facilities are going to have to be in place. Because our bike plan implementation is through the street improvement program. Every street that every arterial and collector street that we are designing through our street zone map will accomplish bike facilities through that PS&E process. So we need a roadmap of the city to know what we're doing where, and not just, you know, at a high level be like, well, there should be a class 2 there. Sometimes they don't even fit. You know, we need dimensional analysis on some of these things. So what we want is a lot more comprehensive to actually see it through. And that's where we are with our discussion with the vendor.
So it sounds like you'll be going back to the city council for additional funding.
Yeah, likely. I mean, there's a lot of eggs in the basket right now. And, you know, we need to do a lot with street infrastructure and we can't afford it. And there's a lot of other needs in the city and we're all sort of talking about the same dollars. So it's a painful prioritization exercise about where does that land. But yeah, we're going to put it in the plan.
Thank you.
And the other thing is that, you know, we want to get all these things done. But what resources do we have? So things will have to get pushed off. Otherwise, we're just not being realistic. And we'll get 5% of everything done
Right.
instead of 100% of a few things done.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ted.
On that bike plan, would it work if you're trying to phase it out to focus on here's the next quarter or the next areas where we're going to do the street improvements on, and so just focus the bike plan on those next couple areas where they're going to do the restriping.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But the interesting thing about our street plan is if everyone recalls, we divided the city up into 24 projects. So, you know, the priority focus was to handle the arterial streets where there is funding, Fremont, Huntington, Fair Oaks, then start to try to address, at the same time, address residential zones that probably don't have bike lanes because they're residential streets. So where the bike plan interaction is going to come in is those special arterial and collector projects that are sort of spaced out over the next 15 years. So yeah, that your point is exactly right. You know, one of the projects on our we've got design authorization to move forward with and funding is the Indiana Avenue and a small section of Pasadena Avenue. So in that interrelationship of Pasadena Avenue and where the bike lane is, you know, on Monterey, maybe on Monterey, that would be the focus. That would be the focus. Is like, okay, we need to, on a from a long-term planning perspective, focus on the areas where we're going to achieve segmented bike lane implementation based on where those projects are timed. So yeah, that's exactly it. It's a really hard thing to coordinate, obviously. Yeah.
Sounds like we need to agendize this, you know, the bike plan.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
And I think the point is, like, if you need to do feasibility, like, don't do the whole city if you can't implement the whole city, right? Like, if you can only do like 5 miles in the next whatever years, like, do that, right?
Well, yeah, and that's exactly what we've asked our consultant to do is like, how do we've told them how we're going to do the implementation. We told them what we have already. They're familiar with it. How we're going to do the implementation through the improvement program. So give us a scope on how you can help us define what that is in relation to our larger improvement plan. And so that's what we have yet to have. And my hope would be that if we're going to talk about it, we have the scope in hand to talk about, and it's not just sort of like a high level discussion. It's like an implementation discussion.
Thank you, Ted. Well, I'm going to propose we move forward to our next item, which is agenda minute approval. That's item. I don't know what the item. Sorry, I don't have the agenda in front of me, but I think the first one is the MTIC meeting. Review and approval of the final MTIC meeting minutes from Tuesday, February 18th, 2025. Any edits or is there go ahead?
One edit, I'm just looking for it here, but I think after my name, there's oh, actually, this changed from what I looked at. Okay. Oh, I think you already corrected it.
Great. Any amendments? All right, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
All right, I don't think you need a second for the minutes, do you?
Second.
Okay, we got a second from Commissioner Kerwin. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? No, motion carries.
I'll abstain. Yeah, just.
Okay,
Just
abstain.
since I wasn't a member then, so I'll just go ahead and abstain.
Okay, the motion carries. So the next we'll move on to the Public Works meeting minutes approval, right? From it looks like November 13th, 2024.
Yes, and it's the chair's discretion if they want to table this for the next meeting, as no active public works commissioners are on the dais today. Well,
Agree with that.
I mean, I think, can we just receive and file?
sure.
Mhm.
Sorry, can you?
Correct. Yeah, that was my second point. That it's at the chair's discretion to either table or to move forward with the motion. It's up to the chair.
I'm gonna recommend we move forward the motion because I think even if we had the other members of the commission, there'd be so many abstentions, right? Right? I'm
I'm happy
gonna-
to rely
That's fine.
on
Yeah.
Right.
Member Ferguson's
All right.
representation.
Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Second. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, no. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we're going to move to our election of officers of the commission. Thanks for letting me fill in today. So it's recommended that the commission conduct the election of chair and vice chair in accordance with the relevant procedures. So any discussion or any nomination?
So, Mr. Chair, I was just going to suggest that we're missing almost half of our body. So I'm wondering if it might make sense to continue it, but just so everybody has an opportunity. But I'm happy to move forward tonight as well. But yeah, let me.
Mhm. Okay. No, I don't want to delay us getting together a work plan, and those kind of conversations.
Yeah, I was
but-
gonna ask staff, is it helpful to have a chair at this point? I mean, is there an issue if we were to table this?
Well, it's kind of a unique position because the code requires us to have this done by March 31st, but it's already April. So I think either way works if you want to move forward because you've got a quorum and you can elect somebody. You can even nominate someone who's not here, but they'd have to accept at the next meeting. So, I shouldn't even say that because you'll probably nominate all the folks that didn't show up. But, but yeah, I mean, I think if I think we have a good understanding of what we want to bring forward in May. So I don't, it would be helpful to have a chair to move forward with work plan development, but We could also draft a work plan and show it to you for next meeting without a chair and then discuss it further with the chair. Really, we could do anything that you feel is appropriate. We've got carte blanche in terms of how we want to organize it. So you won't hold us up. We can be creative about still getting some stuff done. But if you prefer to move forward, you're more than welcome to.
Oh, do you want to say? I was gonna say, 3 comments. One, if the desire is to go forward tonight, I don't want mean to be a stumbling block. I just wanted to make sure everybody was considered if they, we think they should be.
Okay.
Second, an idea is we can select a vice chair who can act as the chair, and we can wait until the next meeting to choose the chair. Or the third thing is we can select an acting chair until the permanent chair. Those
I
are
think
only options.
I think maybe I recommend would that be continuing the item
Can I,
to the next meeting?
ask you guys a question? If you can select officers at any meeting. You don't have, you could always reselect
correct.
officers. So you could do something. It wouldn't be temporary. You'd select somebody and then if you wanted to vote again, you
I think
could.
I think
But-
given we're missing some folks,
Sure,
and
yeah.
then also it sounds like folks with the new commission and new night and new notification, perhaps they didn't get the notification.
Yeah, and a comment on that is, you may know that we've ceased from using your personal emails for communication. We only use your city official emails, and that has caused some confusion or missed noticing just because we've made that transition, and I think that was related to.
That's exactly what happened. I did get in touch with all 3 commissioners this evening. I will be working with them tomorrow to troubleshoot, making sure that they're receiving the emails that we're sending out, as we're only sending out to the South Pasadena ca.gov email. All notices, all agendas, all invites will be sent to that email for all commissioners. So I will make sure that they receive the next set of notifications, and we will try to track a little bit better the attendance with the invites, and maybe that'll help mitigate this issue. But if you'd like to table this agenda item for the next meeting, that's completely fine. If you want to vote on one of the positions and then save the other one for the next meeting, that is also
I think it's cleaner just to re-agendize this at the next meeting.
We can do
not
that.
a problem.
Okay.
We can go ahead and table agenda item number 7 for next meeting. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Our communication section, Councilmember Ferguson, City Council Liaison Communications.
Yeah, I think I communicated most of what I needed to throughout the discussion earlier. The one thing that I did want to mention was just to express my thanks to all of you for stepping up and doing this work within our community. Very essential. And I just kind of want to talk about I kind of talked about the vision for it, but I think that's part of why I feel like it's so important. So thanks a lot. I appreciate your effort. And anything that this is kind of new. It's an old thing, but a new thing as far as being combined again. And so any feedback you have on how that plays out as we go forward, by all means, I'm all ears. So so I appreciate it, and feel free to reach out if I can be of any assistance.
Thank you. All right, Commissioner Communications. Commissioner Abelson, we'll
Okay.
start on my left.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I used up a lot of time tonight, so I'm just going to be brief. Happy to be part of this new commission, at least for the balance of this year. I want to welcome our new commissioner. So happy to have you and look forward to working with every one of you this year, and the rest of the commission. Hopefully we'll see next month. And thank you to Ted and his amazing team. We ask a lot of tough, difficult questions and make a lot of comments, but it's hopefully they're received as constructive. And I think you're amazing and do so much with so little. So thank you for that. And I'll just throw in one thing, operational. The pavement on, I know this could be its own meeting. The pavement on Fair Oaks, particularly northbound, south of Monterey, north of Bank, let's say, I'm sorry, north of Oak, is particularly treacherous. specifically the number 1 lane. So I just wanted to make a plug to see if there's somebody who might be able to go out and take a look and see if there's something. I know there's a bigger scheme where it's all going to be reconstructed, but I'm just wondering in the interim if maybe there can be something temporary that can help. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Sharma?
Well, as my first meeting, just want to say thank you. Thank you to the city council for this opportunity, and thank you thank you for all the presenters. Those were really informative presentations, and I really appreciate you fielding all of our questions. It was a pretty courageous, incredible thing to do this late in the evening. So thank you for sticking through it with all the way through the end. But look forward to participating on this commission and the work ahead. Thank you.
Late in the evening, like you haven't seen anything yet, you know? Like, all right, Commissioner Brunel.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just be very brief. This is my second meeting. So yeah, just echoing everyone, just thank you to the staff. Thank you to Councilmember Ferguson. And it sounds like we do have a pretty like full agenda for next month. And I also wanted to just make a comment. I think it would be interesting to agendize an item where we could talk about sort of broadly street safety in the community. And I think in particular, looking at some mid-block crossing opportunities, as well as restriping some crosswalks in critical areas. Just, I'm relatively new to South Pasadena. I've lived here for about a year now. I walk around the city every day and I walk to the train every day and I encounter folks that do the same. And so I'm always kind of just taking my life in my hands as I cross Fremont. So I think just if we can talk about that at a future meeting, I think that's really critical and something the community would also like to do.
Thank you. Well said.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kerwin.
Yeah, just to echo those comments. Yeah, I appreciate the staff. Director Gerber is always amazing at answering any questions that come his way. But yes, to the comments about safety overall, I mean, I've been involved in some emails lately and so forth about around Arroyo Vista School in particular, safety issues there. It's just an ongoing issue. And so when we're looking at things, even bike plan or things like that, where that's a neighborhood area, but if we can provide some safer routes to school through the neighborhoods, that's a high priority. I want to echo that.
If I could kind of give you some conversation around that. It was recently brought to my attention some safety issues that were happening around Arroyo Vista. When the council member Plymouth and myself met with SPU, the Unified School District, and we kind of talked about some of that, and we're kind of looking at ways in which we can implement like more direct communications regarding when hazardous things happen, especially around the school zones. So that way we can better document and track those types of things. Because the idea is that if close misses are happening, that those are probably areas where we can enhance safety before someone gets hurt. And so it is something that we're working on within the context of the schools. If it's something that I think should also likely be discussed at the Public Safety Commission level, because anything that we do come up with at some point or another will likely require some form of enforcement. But so just to say that it is on the radar. And so I would encourage you, feel free to forward communications you're getting regarding those safety issues, because it's something that we kind of hope to be able to look at and consider in a holistic sense. So thank you.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Public Works. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Ted.
Thank you so much. No real further staff communications tonight. I don't think we have anything else. I was going to talk about work plan development, but I think we covered it sort of during the meeting. And yeah, welcome everybody, and we're excited to get our new commission kicked off here. Yes, please, our staff.
Yeah, before the meeting, I spoke with Mark, and he let me know that the PWIC meeting that's scheduled for May, there's a conflict with the special session.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought it up. So the May,
I believe it's May 12th. It's
14th.
my apologies. May
um,
14th.
so we'll have to reach out to you all to see if we can schedule a special meeting in May. If you're able to provide our team any,
Dates
know,
that might.
dates that don't work on probably a Tuesday night in May, I'm assuming, because we'll have to probably find it, because there's not going to be a Wednesday that's available. That'd be helpful. Didn't know that, so thanks, Philip. Appreciate that.
So you're asking for people's availability on Tuesday nights in May.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that work for the team? I think that's the best way to go.
And maybe if we
Because otherwise we're doing a Wednesday, the 28th. Yeah. So I think that's the best way to
do we want to do this now and at least get 5 of us on board?
That'd be helpful.
Okay.
It saves us a lot of administrative work, but
Yeah,
Well, I also want to just mention that May 13th, which is Tuesday, the day before the PWIC meeting, that one looks like the Planning Commission meets in the chambers.
sure. And then we have NREC on the 27th. So maybe
I would propose staying away from the 27th because of Memorial Day.
that's right.
But
sure,
I'm free this.
maybe the 20th.
I'm free the 6th and the 20th.
Yeah, I was going to vote for the former MTIC night, the May 20th.
That's why it's open. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that works.
All right. So it sounds looks like May 20th works for everyone here, and I guess you'll send that out to our.
Okay.
fellow
Yeah. We'll
commissioners.
verify with the other commissioners, and thank you for doing that.
Yes, I'll make sure to check with them as well.
All right. With that, it is 9:01 p.m. and I'll call the meeting adjourned. Thank you.